Hey, welcome back to the Low Carb Hustle podcast. If you're looking to put a little bit of muscle behind that low carb hustle, you are in the right spot. Now, Hustle Nation, I got a very super cool surprise for you today. Someone that you know, that you love, probably more than me, to be honest with you. But the one, the only, Robert Sikes has agreed to join me as a guest interview on the Low Carb Hustle show. Robert Sikes, Bobby Bricks in the building right now. Can I call you that? Is that kind of like a personal thing that Adam says?
No, I mean, that's totally Adam, but you could totally steal that from him. It's kind of weird, but we can rock with it.
When I say it though, I'm saying it with an X on the end.
Yeah, that's way cooler.
Dude, welcome back to the show. So glad to have you here.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
So what's been going on in your life? So I kind of took over the show like about a month and a half ago. Did you go through any sort of like deep depression or anything else like that we kind of need to get through before we can move into like the info portion?
No deep depression. I tell you what, though, it's been strange not having like a regimented schedule to talk with Danny and Adam because they're kind of like my brother from another mother situation. But we still text regularly, so have not gone into crazy withdrawals just yet. But I've got no doubt that you've been steering the ship quite well yourself. So keep doing what you're doing, man.
I mean, we'll see. It's kind of like I feel like I'm putting off like major substitute teacher vibes right now. Where like, I'm like trying my hardest, but people are like, hey, when he goes out of the room to go to the bathroom, we're gonna draw a dick on the whiteboard. Like that's kind of feel like where I'm at.
I think you're cool, man. I've been following your stuff now for a while, and everything I've seen that you put out thus far has been good vibes for me. So
I appreciate that. So what's new in your world? We got baby Savage on the way, coming to a hospital near you in the next week or so.
We're home birth, man. Coming to a home near you. We're doing a crazy home birth.
Are you gonna do it in the Keto Brick compound?
No, I mean I'd be down with that, but I don't think Crystal wants to do that. So we're gonna do it at the house, just laid back, very relaxed atmosphere and vibe, hopefully. So that's what we got cooking.
Awesome. And then you're dropping some new merch. You got some Keto Savage Apparel coming out soon.
Yeah, we just actually bought a whole bunch of screen printing equipment, so we're going to do all of our own production. So we're getting into that. I actually worked on that some this morning, so I'm kind of learning how the whole process works, but super excited about it. And then just keep rocking and rolling with the Keto Bricks. We had a new flavor that just launched, so just moving that forward as well.
Yeah, that looks super exciting. The nootropic icing. So not only do you get the high fats that you're looking for with the Keto Brick, but you also get the Alpha GPC Lion's Mane.
Yep, Lion's Mane. L-theanine. Yep.
Dude, that's so solid. I'm really excited to grab some of those, and I'm going to get some of that pretty soon because I can't wait to jump into talking a little bit more about keto, because this is an area that honestly I am not super well versed in. I've not really done any like keto coaching. I've never personally been on keto. And if it's cool with you, I'd like to come out of the closet right now.
Do it, man.
Previously, we'll say, talked a lot of shit about keto, to put it like that. I've kind of been down on it. I've said some things that maybe weren't completely fair or accurate. But I just wanted to come out and just say like, hey, I know you're the keto bodybuilding kind of guy, and I want to talk about that because I don't feel like I can keep this inside myself any longer.
Well, I appreciate the transparency, man. It's good. And in all honesty, like if I had started doing keto at a different time, I would very likely have been more frustrated with it than I am currently. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation right now. And like, I know a lot of the people that are the keto haters. And I mean, I totally get where they're coming from in a lot of different regards. I mean, I'm not holding that against you by any means. There's a lot of information out there that's not good, a lot of bad information out there. So I totally understand why some people would want to hate on keto.
Totally. And one thing I like about you and I really respect about you is that you are always doing things from the front line. You're leading from the front, you're doing your stuff, and you're documenting your progress. You're showing, hey, this is what worked for me. This is how I'm doing stuff. This is how I'm staying fat fueled. And then you're putting all of that out into the universe. And I think that is really cool because a lot of people talk, but you look at their lifestyle and they're not really backing it up. You're just seeing them. They're like, I thought you said this thing, and you're over here you're not doing it that way. So I've always appreciated that about you, your integrity and the way you lead by example.
Appreciate that, man. Like for me, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I don't have any acronyms behind my name. So any reason people are going to listen to me is just because I've been there and I've done that and I'm doing that. And that's been what I've tried to do with the bodybuilding and the ketogenic aspect of it. So I'm just documenting my journey every step of the way.
You put out a really cool post on Instagram. So if you're not following Robert on Instagram, you got to go do that, just at Keto Savage. But you put out an interesting post, kind of just to jump right in, about muscle building on keto. And that's one of the main thing that detractors say about the keto diet, is that it's hard to put on muscle, or impossible, or not optimal, or whatever else. But you showed your progress from 2017 to 2021 in between your two shows, when you're at a relatively similar body fat percentage or even lower. And you see the definition, you've definitely gained size. I was curious, do you have the numbers on that in terms of how much you were able to gain in what period of time? Because it was substantial.
Yeah. So I think my last show before I started doing keto was in 2015, probably about the same time in 2015, March, April timeframe. And I want to say I competed at 155 or so, around that area, around that, weight. And then those last pictures that were taken in 2020, which was when I was planning on competing last, those were at about 163, 164. So probably not quite 10 pounds, but about the same conditioning. Honestly, I feel like I got a little leaner with the keto approach, and, coming in at a heavier weight for sure. So I definitely put on, close to 10 pounds in that span. And that, with natural bodybuilding, there's not going to be a drastic shift in the amount of weight that you can put on between competitive seasons. Many people oftentimes only gain a pound or two between shows, but the look of that muscle changes drastically. So that's the main thing I'm looking for.
I think that sometimes people just don't understand what is a lot in terms of natural bodybuilding. And I think that I always visualize it like this, someone's oh, 10 pounds of muscle, shouldn't you be able to gain that in your first year? And I'm okay, well, think about 10 pounds of steak.
Mm-hmm.
You take 10 pounds of some really good choice cuts of beef, and you slap that on your shoulders, you slap a little bit on your chest, you slap a little bit on your back. You are going to substantially change the way you look by gaining, even if it's 3 pounds, your body is going to look completely different by adjusting that muscle up. So yeah, you've done a fantastic job, and in a short time period, especially for natural bodybuilding.
Yeah, natural bodybuilding's been my forte from the beginning. That's kind of always the federations that I've competed in. I've competed in NPC as well, but I've always gravitated towards natural bodybuilding federations. I just prefer the mentality and the approach towards natural bodybuilding. And it's definitely a long game approach. There's, especially now, you've probably heard all these bodybuilders that are dropping dead right now. It's honestly mind boggling how many pro bodybuilders have dropped dead over the past year. And you don't really see that happening near as much in the natural bodybuilding realm. So I feel from a health and longevity standpoint, there's a lot to be said for natural bodybuilding.
I think that for the most part, there's not a lot of us who are trying to step on stage, right? Most of us want to be healthier, to live longer, to look good in a bathing suit, right? I've worked with, 1,100, a couple thousand people. That's what it kind of comes down to. Very few and far between the people who are I want to actually put on enough size so I can go get judged, step on stage, and actually compete in that way. So, taking some of the principles that you talk about in keto bodybuilding that you're putting out, on a regular basis on Instagram and in your stories, and applying those to our lives is only going to help us all move closer to that goal that most of us have.
Yeah, totally, man. I feel at the end of the day, what I practice, what I preach, the methodologies are pretty much the same, whether you're going to step on stage or not. I've got clients that are competing and earning pro cards, and I've got clients that are, 73-year-old grandmothers that are just trying to improve their health and have a few more years with their grandkids, and the principles that I apply towards both of them are pretty similar, honestly. And
then you just had Dr. Jamie Seaman. Did she win her pro card, or did she take first? What was her results?
So she got first, second, third in the different classes she did. She did novice, she did 35 plus, and then she did open. And then the person that she lost to won that show last year. So she pretty good competition in that regard. But yeah, she looked great. She lost 30 pounds, dropped more than 10% body fat throughout that journey. So the package she brought and the progress throughout her journey is very, very noteworthy. I'm super proud of her, very impressed by what she's accomplished. And I've got nothing but good things to say about how her body responded to that.
Yeah, she crushed it. So you handled her nutrition and also her training?
Yeah, so mostly I focus on nutrition. I can definitely help with all my clients' training as well. But if you've got a super solid training plan, I'll tweak your cardio and I'll tweak your macros. But if you've got a solid training plan, there's not really much change that I recommend doing to that throughout the contest prep protocol or throughout a cutting phase. A lot of people make the mistake when they transition to prioritizing fat loss. they'll start lifting a lot differently. They'll start lifting higher repetitions, lower weight. And that's not a good thing. I mean, especially in the context of a lower caloric intake, you want to demand a lot from those muscles to keep them in high demand so that you can preserve that lean tissue in the context of those lower calories. So I advocate for lifting heavy throughout your cutting protocol as well.
I think that's something that a lot of people forget too. They think like that we all kind of fall prey to the myth of like low reps, high weight, that's muscle building, high reps, low weight, that's cutting. And it's not like you can't tone a muscle, right? Your muscle gets bigger, your muscle gets smaller. And the toning comes from dropping the fat from the nutrition side of things. So I love that your priorities.
Like toning shouldn't even be in the dictionary. Like it's not really a real word.
Yeah. I think that like people just talk about like muscle tone, right? And it's hard because on one hand, I want to be like, hey, I want to shake someone and be like, toning's fake. Like you don't need to do 27 reps of lateral raises. But on the other hand, that's the language that people use, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I don't like, as professionals who are trying to serve people to like help them get healthier and fitter, like, even though I think we want to be like toning's fake, you don't need to do that. Like that doesn't really necessarily get them closer. They're not going to be like, oh, you're right. How do I do it? They're going to be like a little bit more turned off. Right.
Yeah. I don't know. It's always pretty cool. When I do talk to one of these, 73-year-old grandmas that jumps on the client call with me and they're like, I want to get ripped. I want to get shredded. I want to get jacked. Like when they've got that lingo, it's like, okay, we're speaking the same language now.
Yeah. You've been listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
Dude, I love it. All right. So do you mind if I kind of come out with a couple of different of like the thoughts I've had around keto? And I just want to hear what your thoughts are, how these can like kind of either work together or I'm off base. I want to like kind of have that conversation.
Yeah, man, let's go.
All right. So one thing that I've always found to be challenging about keto in regards of like keeping people on point is that it is like challenging to sustain. Now you've sustained your keto lifestyle for 5-6 years now straight.
7 years.
Okay. So I think that is incredibly impressive and also makes you like an outlier in that regard. Can you talk to me about how you help coach clients to keep a sustainable keto lifestyle where they're not necessarily like lusting over bagels or finding that like they have no ability to go out and eat with their friends and family?
Yeah. So sustainability, I think, is honestly one of the most paramount points that people need to focus on and get dialed in with whatever diet they're following, whether it's keto or something else entirely. I feel like sustainability is key. For me, keto has been very sustainable. I mean, it totally improved my relationship with food. Like I was struggling with disordered eating tendencies before I found keto. And for me, the foods that I've had to forego to stay keto, I mean, that minuscule sacrifice is far less invasive than what I was struggling with. So for me personally, that's been relatively easy to sacrifice those foods. But I don't even really think of it as a sacrifice because with a quality ketogenic diet, like at the end of the day, I would define it as simply eating quality, wholesome, single ingredient, natural foods with ample dietary fat, optimal protein, and very low carbohydrates. Like that's a pretty healthy diet, no matter which way you cut it. I mean, that's what I would define keto as. And anybody would probably benefit from that style of eating. Some people have a higher carb tolerance than others, but a lot of people, and I'm sure you would agree with this, a lot of people don't earn their carbs, so to speak. I mean, if your idea of a hardcore training session is doing 20 minutes of laundry and taking the dog for a walk and getting the mail at the end of the mailbox, I mean, that's not really conducive to needing a carb up. So a lot of people don't earn the carbs they are eating anyways. But as far as making keto sustainable, when you look at through the lens of high quality, single ingredient, nutrient dense foods, like why would we not want to sustain that anyway? That just seems like a logical thing to do. And yeah, there's a lot of temptation in regards to like all the heavily processed foods, all the, sweet, sugary foods that people have this, dopamine hit from. But for me, I'm so passionate about just optimizing my health day after day after day in a compounding manner that the appeal of that drives me much more than that temporary high that I would get from these foods. So I don't really feel drawn to them at all personally. There was a time in my life where I could not walk through the bakery section of a grocery store, but that time is long since gone. Now I just don't care. I don't have any drive towards it. For people that do still have that drive, then I think really just sitting them down and having a conversation about how to make things healthy, sustainable, and long-term, last is key. Some people are going to be better at moderating foods and some people are going to be better at eliminating foods. The people that have a tendency to eliminate foods and do better and find that more sustainable, if you try and have a discussion with them about, hey, look, you only live life once, going to this birthday party, having some birthday cake, it's not going to kill you. Go ahead and indulge and just get right back on track. Like if they're one that is more likely to be optimized with an elimination style approach, if they have that birthday cake because they feel like they're supposed to be able to have that, it's just going to result in a negative feedback loop that just keeps spiraling out of control. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients that I've worked with over the years, they've, wanted to go that route, had something, and then they've come back to me and they're like, that was a bad idea. Not my cup of tea. I'm more of an elimination style person. And sometimes it takes the slip up to recognize that, but really having the self-awareness to know which of the two you are is very, very important.
I love what you said. Like two things that really stood out is number one, elimination or black and white, having like a binary, it's yes or it's no. It's not like I have a little bit here. It can be a lot more beneficial for people. And I think that's what I love about like fasting protocols. It's like, there's no food and then you can have food. It's like, it's off and it's on. It's not like making choices, which I think can be helpful. The other thing that you said that was really interesting. And I think that really applies to like the ketogenic lifestyle is optimize. It's like you get more of a dopamine hit off of optimizing your energy, optimizing your health, optimizing some of your probably your blood like protocols and hormonal pathways and stuff than you do off of eating a sugar cookie.
Yeah, totally. And another thing that's probably not as applicable to the general population is that in doing what I've done for as long as I have, it's kind of become my identity in a sense. And if you talk to some people, that's a bad thing. But when I look at my life and what I've built and the brand that I've established and how people look to me for inspiration and education, I like that I'm the strict keto guy. I like that I can, plant my flag in the ground and say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. It's worked for me for 7 years thus far. I have no intentions of deviating from it. I keep getting better and better with each year that passes. And I can be, an illustration of somebody that people can point to and be like, hey, look, everyone that's saying I'm going to be suffering if I do strict keto, like there's somebody doing it right there and they're excelling with it. So like if he can do it, I could probably do it too. So just giving people, a light in the darkness in that regard. And since I've been doing it like I have, as long as I have, and you have that identity built up into it, like I don't want to deviate from it because I feel like a lot of people are, holding me in high regard and have this expectation of me. And I like that. Like it's kind of mutually beneficial because it keeps me wanting and hungry to maintain the course as well.
You got like 50,000 accountability partners.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I think that also speaks to the power of community too. There's not a community for people who are in like, we're doing really like a light carb and then we're going to have a carb like up day. And then we're going to go with Subway sandwiches. Like there's not like a community or identity around it. So it's the one thing that I like about like keto, about CrossFit is that it's like, hey, this is what I'm doing right now. This are the people that I'm doing it with.
Yeah. And there's a double-sided, edge to that as well, because I mean, a lot of people that lean too heavily on their identity with something, they become increasingly dogmatic towards that thing. And there's a lot of people that knock keto because of the, quote unquote keto zealots out there that are so ingrained and entrenched in their belief system that their diet has become a religion. And that's not what I would want to advocate for at all. Like I don't stick with keto for that reason. Like that's not where I'm coming from. There are people like that. And who am I to say that they're right or wrong, but that's not the direction that I've wanted to take things. So I understand why people would look down at those in the space that have taken that approach and have become overly zealous towards it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's everywhere, right? I've heard the joke before. It's like, how do you tell if someone does CrossFit?
Ask them if they do CrossFit, right?
No, don't worry. They'll tell you. They'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And same thing with keto. I mean, there's a lot of that in every sub niche culture. You're probably going to find that. I mean, you're going to see that in the vegan communities and the hardcore bodybuilding community. I mean, you're going to find that in everything. And there's some positives to them, and there's some negatives to that. I mean, if it's allowing you to find a sense of belonging and therefore maintain that inspiration and keep consistent with it, then I think that's a very positive that comes from that sense of community and that culture aspect. But when you take it to the point of it becoming an echo chamber and you can't think outside the box, you can't have an open mind, that's when it becomes a negative.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that like what you said earlier about having enough self-awareness to know, do you need an elimination style diet or do you need a moderation style diet? That also goes into this. Like, are you now picking one aspect of your nutrition or your fitness, or whatever else, and basing your entire personality around it? Is that going to make you horrible at Thanksgiving dinner with your grandma? Like let's take a breath,
Yeah, totally. 100%.
So I like your perspective on that. And I think that like, you're right on that. Some people need that elimination style in order to be able to move through it. There's a quote that I really love by a guy named Gustave Flaubert. He says, be boring and orderly in your life so that you can be violent and original in your work. And I think that a lot about nutrition.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
When you come to a place where you're like, I don't really think about it. I have the same similar breakfast every day. I'm having the same similar snacks, similar dinners. I'm not stressing about it. Then you can go out and do the things that you like, that light you up, that are important to you, instead of being so worried about the myopic stuff about how many grams of carbs or whatever else. It's already set.
Yeah, I feel like, there's like, for me, I view life through phases and through cycles. So I'm in a building phase, I'm in a cutting phase. When I'm in a building phase, I allow myself to be more relaxed. I'm not tracking every single macro to the gram. I'm not near as rigid with my nutrition. I still stay strict keto. That's just my lifestyle at this point, but I'm not worried about tracking everything to the gram. I ensure that I'm getting enough calories and enough protein. By being more lax in that building phase, when I'm in a cutting phase, I can be much more rigid. It's kind of like the yin and the yang approach to it all. Like, it balances each other out. If I was going to be all extremist one way all the time, then I would likely burn out. But if you can balance those, in a healthy manner, you can be a lot more intensive when it's time to be intensive.
There's some definite wisdom in what you just said there. So I'm going to go back and listen to that again, because I think you're 100% right about that. Speaking of which, though, you mentioned protein, and okay, this is kind of my limited understanding of keto. It's going to rear its head right now, but I've always understood that to do a ketogenic diet, you needed to do 4 grams of fat to every 1 gram of protein, and then keep your carbs under, I've heard, 40, 60, and 80. Kind of like, can you talk a little bit about that? And also how like you set up your protein to be able to facilitate muscle growth?
Yeah. So I don't ever really like to think of, the ketogenic diet is oftentimes hailed as this percentage style diet, in which case you're getting like 80% fat, 25%, that doesn't make sense. 80% fat, 20% protein, or like a 75, 25, with protein and carbohydrates. And like, there's times what I do with myself and with my clients is I'll adjust macronutrients every single week based off of the goals. So they might be at 80% fat percentage one week, and the next week 78, and the next week 77. Like, it changes and it's constantly in a state of flux. So for neither myself or my clients is the ketogenic diet a set macro distribution. Like, that's always changing. So that's the first thing I'd say there. When it comes to protein, there's a lot of discussion and discourse right now about how much protein can you tolerate, how low do you need to go with keto, how high do you need to go with keto. And honestly, it really just depends on one's level of fat adaptation. It depends on one's level of lean muscle tissue. It depends on their caloric thresholds. Lots of variables at play. I'll typically start people at a higher fat ratio with lower protein, and then I'll titrate their protein up gradually until I find their own unique threshold to that protein. So a few years back, everybody was deathly afraid of protein. They assumed that it would turn into chocolate cake as soon as it entered their system, and they would avoid protein at all costs for fear of gluconeogenesis. And like, you've heard all this.
It's always happening to us. Gluconeogenesis, just hiding around your corner. It's like in your sauce drawer.
And that like, I was shaking my head back when that was the popular, the popular dogma. Now it's the complete opposite in the spectrum. The pendulum has swung so far the other direction that people are giving protein this halo, and they're saying, look, all the protein you can eat, don't worry about protein consumption as much as possible. You can't overdo it. And that's not really true either. Like, the answer lies somewhere in the middle, and that's going to be a little bit different for each individual. So if you're trying to optimize your energy, your metabolism, your function from a ketogenic standpoint, you're probably not going to want to have an obsessive amount of protein, because at some point, you will have a gluconeogenic effect. And that's just honestly calories that you could use towards energy, because protein is not a great substrate for energy. Protein is incredibly important, but it's not a great substrate for energy. So if you're taking in very little fat and very little carbs, and you're taking in a massive surplus of protein, then your body's going to have to inefficiently convert that to energy, which is just not a clean process.
Costs you like 30%, 33% of each, of each gram of protein to convert it to like glucose, right?
Yeah, it's just not a worthwhile approach to your energy demands. Or on the opposite of the spectrum, you don't want to be consuming so little protein that you can't build muscle tissue, you can't recover from your training. So there's a balance there to be had between every individual. And the more deeply adapted you are, generally speaking, the more protein you can tolerate without having a negative adverse effect. also is true. The more muscle mass you have, the higher your metabolic rate is going to be, the more total calories you can consume. I mean, like for me personally, my maintenance intake is probably somewhere between 3,000 and 3,300 calories. So my fat ratio is quite high. I'm typically at about 73 to 75% of my calories coming from fat on a regular basis. But because my calories are so high, I'm still taking in a lot of protein. I'm taking in like probably 200 grams of protein every single day, which is totally sufficient for someone with my stats to have enough protein coming in to build and recover. Now, if you're chronically under eating and you're only taking in 900 calories a day because you've been under this, chronic restriction mindset, then you're not going to be taking enough calories. Your metabolism is going to tank. Your hormones are going to suffer. You're not going to be able to consume enough protein to fuel your body's demands. And you're not going to have enough calorie coming in from an energy standpoint to want to sustain your day-to-day activities. So, where your caloric threshold is and lies is also a very important part of the equation.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. I didn't even think about the fact that like when you are in extreme like carbohydrate restriction or you're really limiting those, then your threshold for hitting gluconeogenesis and converting protein into glucose is going to be a lot higher. You're going to do that more often, more frequently. So I think the fat adaptation and muscle mass, keeping those into account is really interesting. 200 grams of protein though, that's completely sufficient. I'm always setting my clients' protein basically at goal lean body mass and then having them work the rest of the macros around that.
Yeah, I think that's a super solid, general baseline recommendation. I mean, eating 1 gram of protein per pound of goal weight or per pound of lean mass or however you want to, structure it, that classic, I mean, that's kind of like an old bro, wisdom, but I mean, it works. Like it's worked, it has worked, it will continue to work. Like that's a good general recommendation for sure.
Cool. All right. How many meals are you eating a day to get in the 3,300 with the 200 grams of protein? Because 200 grams of protein is no joke.
I typically eat about 2 meals a day. So I'll wake up, I'll have like a fatty coffee or two with just, coffee and heavy cream. And then I'll have my first meal is normally around 10 to 2, somewhere in that window. And it'll be like today, for instance, I had a pound and a half of barbecue. And then I'll have my second and final meal sometime this evening. And that's going to be today. It's going to be a 16-ounce ribeye steak and some stuffed jalapeno poppers. And then I'll have a brick in there at some point as well for an extra 1,000 calories.
All right. That's solid. When you're measuring your meals in pounds of meat, like that's exactly what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah.
Do you do like any MCT oil or anything else, or just do coffee and heavy cream in the morning?
I'll sometimes do MCT oil. I don't really gravitate too much. I mean, I just like a super simple cup of coffee with heavy cream. I mean, that's kind of like my go-to. I'd like to be able to taste the coffee. I don't like coffee that's black though. I like a little bit of heavy cream. And I've got a really good wife who makes it for me. So she uses one of those milk frothers. So we'll put the heavy cream in the milk frother, which totally changes the consistency of it. It's like,
a latte now.
Yeah, it's good.
Don't worry, I won't tell anybody.
All right, that's good. Appreciate that. And I'm only just putting like 4 tablespoons of heavy cream per cup of coffee. And I've got a pretty hefty cup of coffee. So I definitely still taste. It's not like a latte in the sense of, there's still a lot of water in there, but it's pretty good.
All right. So one final thing that I've thought about a lot in terms of like taking someone from 0 to keto is like getting someone to start like rapidly increasing their fat, like the amount of fat they're taking in can sometimes be negative for someone who has like fatty liver disease, who has insulin resistance, or who has high levels of visceral fat. So I've often while shifting someone towards being a higher fat diet, I've always said like, hey, let's start off with a little more protein, more vegetables, and then gradually, like kind of what you were talking about the protein, titrate up the fats in order to make sure that they're actually becoming fat adapted and not just like not being able to process and utilize that fat because of, a fatty liver or something like that. Have you worked with anyone like that? Does that resonate at all?
Yeah. So I'll typically, like if they're coming from a standard American diet with a lot of carbohydrates, I'll generally transition them to a higher fat ratio right at the gates. However, if they have issues assimilating that fat, like if their bile production is all screwed up, if they need to.
And how are you knowing if they're assimilating? Like, how are you checking that? That's really interesting.
Mostly how they feel. Like if they're like, for instance, if you're coming from a standard American diet and you're getting all of your or if you're getting all your energy from carbohydrates and glucose, a lot of people make the mistake of, okay, I'm going to go keto. So I'll, do higher protein. I'll cut the carbs, but they're like, I got a lot of fat to lose. So I'll also not eat much fat. And they'll pretty much swap over to a very high protein version of keto, but they have like we're talking about earlier, there's not really any energy coming in. So at that point, it becomes they don't feel very well because they have no energy coming in. They just have a whole bunch of protein that they're trying to assimilate. And then since they don't have any energy coming in, they're not going to feel very well. So then they'll likely deviate and totally go off course. Then it just becomes this, perpetual negative feedback loop. So I'll try and start them out at a higher fat ratio to give them that energy that's kind of going to replace the absence of carbohydrates. I'll make sure that they're like if they do have issues, like if they don't have a gallbladder, if they're not producing enough bile, if they don't have enough stomach acid, like those are all deeper dives that we have to kind of hone in on. Maybe temporary supplementing with bile salts or HCl or something like that. But generally speaking, if that's not the case and they're able to tap into that energy, it's going to be a few weeks before they're actually efficiently using it as a fuel source. So making sure their electrolytes are dialed in, they're getting enough hydration. That's going to really help mitigate those quote unquote keto flu symptoms. And then from there, I'll be able to start increasing their protein over time.
Keto flu, fake?
It's not fake. It's not really a good word for it though. Like, I don't like that word. I mean, keto flu, at the end of the day, keto flu, as most people recognize it, is just simply not feeling good, and they'll have headaches and muscle cramps. So you don't feel good because you don't have any energy coming in and your electrolytes are off. Because when you go away from carbohydrates, 1 gram of carbohydrate and 1 gram of glycogen holds about 3 grams of water. So when people switch over to keto, they drop all the carbs, they flush out all that fluid. Their kidneys also flush out their sodium and potassium. So they're just incredibly out of whack from an electrolyte equilibrium standpoint. And everything in the body is run by electrolyte and electrical synapses. So your brain, your muscle function, everything. So making sure you're supplementing with enough sodium and potassium, making sure you're drinking enough water to replenish that fluid loss is going to be key to minimizing the risk of headaches or muscle cramps. And then making sure they're taking in enough fat so they can eventually use it as a fuel source to tap into is going to be key.
All right. Okay. So fine. I'm sold. I'll do it. Will you just stop yelling at me though?
Yeah, man, let's do it. Roll up our sleeves, rock and roll.
All right. So here's what I'll commit then. I'm gonna commit as a previously closeted keto hater. I'm gonna do 30 days ketogenic diet starting in May, and then we can kind of talk again, see what the results were. I'll do my biometrical impedance. I'll take some measurements. I'll track my sleep as well. I got the Oura ring.
Are you tracking your macros at all now?
Not the moment. Generally speaking, I'm about 205 right now. So I hang out around like 33 to 3,500 calories, kind of maintenance mode. And then I'll go heavier if I'm bulking or trying to build up, but I haven't really done that in a minute.
So hold variables constant whenever possible. So if you're taking in 3,300 calories now, keep that same caloric intake throughout the month of doing keto. Start the month of May at about 3,300 calories, but 80% of your calories coming from fat. A week later, drop that to 77% of your calories coming from fat. The next week, go to 75. The next week, go to 73, and then the next week, go to like 70 or something. But keep the calories constant that whole time if you really want to get a good gauge for it and figure out what ratio your body responds best to. But if you do that, you should have a pretty good idea of how your body feels at those different ratios. Okay,
I'll track them up for the next week or so, then to see kind of if I've been off in my kind of like maintenance mode right now.
Yeah.
So that I'm not throwing a new wrench into the system. Okay. And then is there a number of carbohydrates I should limit myself to staying underneath?
So everyone's going to have a different carbohydrate threshold, quote unquote, what they can consume while still maintaining a state of ketosis. I generally recommend, just keeping that low. Like I personally keep mine at less than 20 grams total carbs a day. It's just easy for me. I don't have to worry about it. And there's some trace carbs and like whole eggs and heavy cream and things like that. I don't really count those. I don't count the carbs in heavy cream, eggs, raw oysters, and liver. Those are the 4 things I don't count the carbs in. Everything else I'm counting. So I just keep it less than 20 grams total. And with that, I'm able to still have some vegetation if I want to have some greens. I'm able to consume, a little bit, and like the trace carbs that add up from those different foods are not really going to exceed 20 grams total. Now, a lot of people can tolerate more and still maintain a state of ketosis, but I don't really think they're experiencing any enhanced performance benefit from those extra carbs. So I just don't really use them. I would rather allocate those calories to fats and proteins.
Okay. All right. So 20 grams, is that net carbs? So like if I was including some broccoli in there, I wouldn't really necessarily count all the carbs in that because of the fiber.
I would count total. I mean, you said you're way 205.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would probably do 30 grams total for you as a upper threshold. But if you're counting total carbs, so fiber is included, and you're staying below 30 grams total carbs, you should be solid.
Okay. That's a challenge. Gauntlet is thrown.
Rock and roll, man.
What do you think is going to happen?
I
Will I
think,
be as handsome as you when I finish?
well, I don't know. I haven't been able to grow a beard like you, so I'm doing something wrong.
It's
I
all
mean,
the
you probably
carbs. I
feel
just rub them on my face.
there you go. That's what I'm missing on. Honestly, man, like if you keep the calories constant, you'll probably flush out some water, so you'll probably lose a little bit of weight there. But I'm curious to see how your cognition feels. I would rather you keep the calories constant, because a lot of people, they have a satiating effect once they go keto, so they'll eat fewer calories and they'll have a drop in weight as a result. That in tandem with the loss in fluid weight. But I would rather you just keep your calories constant. That way you're kind of comparing apples to apples in that regard, and just see how you feel.
How many keto bricks do I need for the month?
I eat one a day. I mean, you certainly don't have to have any breaks, but I personally
No, I'm pretty sure I
one
need
every
some
day.
keto bricks for this to really be effective.
Yeah. Well, you can certainly factor that in for sure. I mean, it makes it easy. I mean, you're eating 1,000 calories in one brick, and it's a high quality fat, so you don't have to worry about getting a good quality fat in.
All right. Okay. All right. Because I generally do something a little bit like sweet at night. I'll make like a protein and berries type of thing. So I feel like, again, like replacing it with something rather than removing it entirely was going to be the better option for me in general. So
yeah, I think anytime you can replace something, I mean, it makes it more sustainable. You kind of have that psychological, implication of not feeling like you're going without and going into withdrawals. And I feel like that in itself makes it more sustainable. So I think that'd be good.
cool. All right. Well, I'm really excited. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm a little nervous because like, what if I feel amazing and then I've been lying for a really long time? Like then, then I'm gonna come out and be like, I was wrong, and I hate saying I was wrong.
Hey, it's possible, man. I mean, I would never want to give people delusions of grandeur. Like the ketogenic diet is great, but you're not going to likely perform at an elite level within your first month of doing it. Like I've been doing it for 7 years, and it gets progressively better over time. It's got kind of like a compounding effect as you get more deeply adapted over time. Your body continues to build the metabolic machinery that allows you to function at a higher rate. But I mean, after a month of doing it, if you kind of keep everything dialed in, then you should at least know if you like it or hate it.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with the weights and stuff at the gym as well. So yeah. Just, I mean, but it's good to do these, like, it's good to do experiments. I love that N1, like of just trying to figure out what works for you. Cause like at the end of the day, maybe keto is not the right choice for a person, but there is probably something that fits their mentality, fits their goals, fits their lifestyle that they can use. So like figuring out, testing a lot of different things and trying it out. So I'll throw something out right now to the listeners. Anyone who wants to join this month, this episode is coming out like May 4th. So if you want to join me and jump in and try this, we'll be doing it through May, kind of in the community. So love to see what you guys think. If you've tried it before and you're like, you got some words of advice or wisdom for me, just send them my way too, because, I don't want to be a big baby about this,
Hey man, you got this. We'll know after a month if your beard, disperses, that it was carbohydrate induced beard right there.
It's just like gone. It's like patchy. And dude, like I'm gonna tell you right now, you do not want to see this chin.
I've seen people that have like no chin, and that's why they have a beard, and they'll shave. It's just kind of scary. I can't imagine it's that bad for you though, but who knows?
It's not, I wouldn't go and say it's a strong chin. It's not like, it's not benching body weight. That's kind of the thing.
Gotcha. Well, I can't even grow a beard. So, I mean, I got that working against me.
But you got the chiseled jawline. So you're set. You're good to go.
There we go. I'll rock that.
All right. True or false? Last question real quick. On the keto or the Keto Savage gear, it's going to be the silhouette of you.
A lot of the swag will definitely have the silhouette of me. I mean, that was my silhouette that I had for my pro card win back in 2017. So that's on a lot of the gear. That's on the logo. But we're doing like a whole lifestyle line too. So we're going to have all kinds of gear. So it's going to be good.
Awesome, man. Well, really looking forward to seeing it. Can't wait to have you back on the show and check in, see how these things are going. But man, thank you so much for coming through, dropping some wisdom on us, just talking about keto, tolerating my BS, all of it.
Hey man, appreciate you, Nate. Appreciate what you're doing. Love the vibe and the aura that you're putting out. So keep rocking and rolling, man.
Anything you want to leave us with today?
I just want to say that the listeners of the Low Carb Hustle podcast, that I feel like they're in good hands with you, man. I mean, like I said earlier, I feel like everything that you put out that I've seen has been positive. You got the right upbeat vibe. I think you honestly could give Adam a run for his money on his energy. So you got that working for you.
Ooh, that feels good to hear. Thank you so much. Big shoes to fill. All right, Robert, I'll talk to you very soon. Thanks again, brother. Really, really happy to have you on the show.
Hey, appreciate you, man. Have a good one.